Thank you for watching our pre-recorded webinar, Next Generation Marketing Fulfillment, the Benefits of a Strategic Approach. I'm Megan Efforts, Vice President of Marketing with Archway Marketing Services. Archway is a leading marketing execution and fulfillment company headquartered in Minneapolis, Minnesota, with over 4 million square feet of fulfillment space across North America. We take a strategic approach to marketing fulfillment and look beyond putting things in boxes. Although we do that really well, we're focused on how optimizing the marketing supply chain can enhance the customer experience when they're interacting with our clients' brands. We've partnered with Forrester Research to provide key insights and thought leadership to the industries we serve. Fatima Kadablu, Senior Analyst, Forrester Research, will be presenting our webinar today. Fatima is focused on customer intelligence, strategies and services, as well as trends and issues surrounding privacy, identity, data portability, and the emerging consumer data economy. Because this is a pre-recorded event, you will not have an opportunity to ask questions, but should you have any, please feel free to contact me after viewing this webinar.
So marketing fulfillment, what is it? And really, why does it matter? You know, marketing fulfillment in our world are all of the touch points, all of the things, the collateral, the pieces of marketing material, packaging, gift cards, the stamps in a Coke bottle cap. These are all marketing fulfillment materials, and they're the things that so often fall by the wayside as we're starting to plan marketing campaigns and marketing programs. They're sort of the last mile, the last touch point that our customers see, but we don't really think of them early enough in the process. One of the examples of this, of course, is this mayhem of marketing collateral that you find at, for example, a McDonald's. It is so often the case that marketing collateral and marketing fulfillment materials don't match up with the actual marketing deployments and the outbound marketing that we do to customers. And so we really went back and decided to think about marketing fulfillment in a different way. And we decided to define it. And with Archway, together we define marketing fulfillment as the production and fulfillment of not-for-sale items and their distribution to retail and non-retail locations, as well as sales outlets in support of sales activities. So pretty straightforward definition there, right? So what is the state of marketing fulfillment today? That was really the key question that we tried to answer as part of the survey that we undertook at the end of last year. So we spoke with 250 organizations, 248 organizations, I apologize, across 8 different verticals in North America. And we talked to the people who are decision makers responsible for managing marketing fulfillment processes in their organizations. That could be anybody from a marketing director or VP of marketing to an operations management type person who also manages the distribution and the supply side chain of some of these processes. We wanted to understand how they fund marketing fulfillment, the measurability of marketing fulfillment, how they measure marketing fulfillment, and how frequently. We wanted to understand the technologies that they use and the resources that they have assigned to marketing fulfillment. And finally, we really wanted to get at this idea of maturity. We thought it was really important to understand how mature the organizations that we're speaking to are, and if there's actually a maturity continuum that we could actually map against. So the industries that we spoke with, pretty much what you might expect, and we did try to keep a fairly equal view of all of these industries. So CPG, consumer technology, financial services, of course, food and beverage, healthcare and medical, pharma, which we categorize differently from healthcare and medical, retail, and finally business services. And within these organizations, we asked who really drives marketing fulfillment, and determined that it is primarily in the marketing seat. Marketing leads and then procurement organizations participate in managing the marketing fulfillment processes, and that tended to be the majority of the organizations that we spoke with. Procurement in a small percentage, or in about a quarter of the cases, procurement leads and marketing participates from a more strategic level, but procurement is really the decision-making entity. In rare cases, there are equal marketing and procurement participation, and very, very rarely we found, to our satisfaction, to our great satisfaction actually, that procurement is rarely in the driver's seat without marketing being involved. But the state of this really varies. The state of maturity and the state of marketing fulfillment within these organizations varies. Companies are really disseminating a large array of materials, from documentation in about 80% of the cases to about half of our participants distributing samples across their marketing fulfillment program, and on down the line through a fairly minimal number of folks using marketing fulfillment for gift cards, packaging, rebates, and fixturing. So fairly limited, right? Now, they're distributing these materials across a broad range of outlets. And again, we found an overwhelming majority of the folks that we spoke with who are using field sales in internal companies. About 40% using channel partners, also a fairly sizable number. But fewer than a quarter are actually using more than these two channels. So branches, dealers, a retail store that's owned by one's company, or a retail partner that's not related, franchisees. Still, this is a broad range of outlets, and even within the 250, despite the fact that not everyone, of course, is using these different channels, there are multiple channels being used by each. So it's really important then that the materials be delivered in a timely fashion, that this measurement is happening frequently, and so on. Now, the other big thing that we found, the big aha, was that companies really place a disparate value on marketing fulfillment as functions within their organization. So the most important consideration, of course, is cost. And that's not a big surprise. I suspect that anything we asked with respect to marketing functions today, cost would be a major issue. But the quality of materials and timeliness are also two big issues or two key considerations that companies point to in their marketing fulfillment processes. The thing is, very few, and actually I'm going to go back to a second here, only about 30% of the folks that we spoke with told us that marketing fulfillment is something that they use to drive optimal customer experiences. And I'll come back to this point a little bit later, because it's something we found that actually differentiated the folks who are really mature in their marketing fulfillment practices versus those who weren't so mature. Now, we asked these people what optimal customer experience really means to them, and we got a range of answers, but the crux of it is that we want our customers to get a positive impression of our brand. We want our customers to be impressed with our materials. We want them to think that we're marketing geniuses. And one of the really important ones that we heard in the upper right-hand corner there, the alignment of the organization around a vision of service philosophy, around a vision of customer experience. Organizationally, that's one of the biggest challenges we find to these kinds of maturity models, and really an important one. So the other thing here is that they're really facing multiple challenges to executing marketing fulfillment, right? What might these be? I suspect none of these will be a surprise to most of the people on the call today. Vendor issues. Vendor compliance and the difficulty of a vendor's ability to react to last-minute changes, these rank really high on some of the challenges that our clients are facing. But the majority are still outsourcing fulfillment. Fully 70-odd% of the folks that we spoke to are using 1 to 15 external vendors. So given that their vendors are one of their biggest challenges, we think that this is a really key area of improvement for marketers to focus on. And again, they're outsourcing this work to a myriad of types of vendors as well, right? So we found most people were using a printer as a vendor, so they're printing the marketing collateral in one place. They're using a shipper or a freight company to deliver the materials elsewhere. They're using an ad agency to actually create the marketing materials. And then a mere 40% of the folks that we spoke with are actually using fulfillment specialists to tie this whole thing together, right? So in each of these situations, there's very little visibility into that final line of sight, into is my marketing collateral actually making it to the end user's hands? These are some of the areas that we think that you should be focusing on. So we also found that budgetary limitations, well in line with the fact that cost is a key consideration, budgetary limitations are definitely an issue. So we found that there's actually a lack of budget, generally speaking, to support the quality of these marketing materials, but there's also a lack of budget to manage against the delivery of these materials, to measure against the delivery of these materials, right? So pretty important there. And that really stems from the culture. This lack of budget is a cultural issue. When the internal stakeholders aren't delivering approvals and aren't delivering changes in a timely fashion, the marketing fulfillment folks can't do their jobs. Pretty big problem there. And again, taking this another level up the chain, it comes down to the executive support, right? So we found that not generally speaking, but in a number of the organizations we spoke with, there's definitely a lack of executive support, largely because there's not an understanding of what marketing fulfillment really is. How do we define marketing fulfillment? And then again, what is the impact? So there's this whole cycle of being able to measure the impact of marketing fulfillment, delivering the visibility and those insights to the business leaders, and then having them drive a whole chain of support on down the line to internal stakeholders. So really, this is marketing fulfillment sort of is the stepchild, as it were, of the marketing strategy and planning process. So then we got into some of the questions of measuring and assessing marketing fulfillment and how companies are doing that today. We found some disparate views. Again, timeliness we can measure, but accuracy and quality, a little bit harder to do. So we can tell, 60% of the firms that we spoke with are measuring the fulfillment within a given time frame. So that is to say, we can tell that a marketing collateral piece, marketing fulfillment program was delivered to the store at the right place and time. However, we can't tell how accurately it was delivered. We can't tell whether the order was actually accurate. We can't tell if the inventory itself was accurate. And certainly we can't tell what inventory was used. So at the back end of that campaign, we can't really tell whether or not the marketing collateral was actually used. Now, we also found that companies are auditing these metrics on different bases depending on the metric itself. So, nearly 50% of the people that we spoke with are measuring on a quarterly basis or more the quality of the materials that are being delivered. So, whether that's talking to a store manager and asking whether the materials were delivered and the quality and the condition that they were in, or actually using one of their marketing fulfillment vendors to manage that for them, 50% of them are doing that on a really frequent basis. But actual use and efficiency of process, only about 30% of the people that we spoke with are measuring that frequently. So you realize that there's actually a breakdown between their ability to measure and how frequently they can measure. The other thing we found, given that firms are using a myriad of vendors, is that too many are relying on their vendor SLAs to actually measure their fulfillment quality. So again, 3 different kinds of SLAs, whether timeliness, quality, or accuracy, these aren't a substitute for a firm's own analytics, right? They're not a replacement for owning the measurement and accountability of marketing fulfillment in your organization. SLAs only get you so far. We just found that most companies aren't moving beyond that. So I want to kind of pause there, make sure there's no questions on the board. I'm not seeing any. Just a reminder to please feel free to deliver some questions as you'd like. And just another quick reminder that we are also going to be asking you a question in just a couple of minutes here as well. So one of the things that we think is really important as we undertake a project like this is to identify a continuum of sophistication or maturity. Trying to understand where organizations fit on both a vertical basis and sort of a depth and organizational breadth perspective. How sophisticated are companies when it comes to this particular practice? So we ask companies to self-report first, and this is always a great exercise because it gives us some direction as to how we'll tailor some of our research and then how we'll actually deliver some of the research via webinars and white papers and things like that. So we asked companies how effective they think they are, their company's approaches to marketing fulfillment as they compare to their peers. And 50% of them told us that they were about equal. They're about as effective as their peers. 30% thought that they were more effective than their peers. And you'll see that very, very few folks thought that they're actually less effective than their peers. Now, that's not always a surprise. I think we always expect that self-reported information can be, you know, fairly, we want to believe that we're equal or better than our peers. But that's not always really the truth of the matter. So then we actually dug deep into these survey responses, and I want to say that these surveys were really in-depth. I think if there's anyone on the line who actually completed these surveys, you know that we asked you in-depth questions about everything from maturity to technology to financing and reporting, and folks spent about 20 or 30 minutes with these surveys. So we went really deep into the survey responses, and we categorized companies based on what we thought their relative maturity was. And what we found was sort of a three-tiered system. So we created these buckets that we call the leaders, the latents, and the laggards. And I'll start at the bottom. The laggards are the folks who don't really see fulfillment as an important part of a customer-centric marketing strategy. In fact, they don't really see marketing fulfillment as part of marketing strategy at all. They tend to think about marketing fulfillment much later in the process of marketing planning. So latents, they understand it. They know marketing fulfillment is important. They know that, and this is across all industries, they know that they need to shore up their marketing fulfillment capabilities. They still fit those squarely between the laggards and the leaders. And the leaders are the ones who say, you know what, marketing fulfillment is a really important part of our marketing program. We have executive sponsors, we invest in it, we fund it well, we measure it, we manage against it, we've got metrics and KPIs in place, and this is an important part of our marketing program. So here comes our poll, and I want to make sure that it comes up here. I'd like to know, let us know whether you think that your organization is a leader, a latent, or a laggard. And we'll just give you, 15 or 20 seconds to do this. All right. So, let's see here. All right, so based on our poll there, be curious to see what our final net numbers are. But in the research that we ended up doing and how we ended up mapping folks against these numbers, what we found were that 52% of the people that we spoke with are laggards. Fully half of the organizations who responded to our survey have very limited focus on their marketing fulfillment practices. About 35% are latent, so that was actually impressive to see. And a mere 14% of the companies that we spoke with are those that we would consider leaders. Now, in the grand scheme of things, that's not a big surprise, right? So we're sort of looking at the poll results, and we've got some 30-odd% of you who responded that you're leaders, and about 16% who said that you're latent, and about 5% of you who responded that you're laggards. Now, there's a bunch of you who didn't respond, but we found that, I mean, this is typical of what we see, right? Most people think that they're just doing a much better job in marketing fulfillment because they don't realize how much is involved. They don't realize how much more they could be doing with the right partnerships, with a deeper focus on how marketing fulfillment, affects the customer experience. So what differentiates these guys, right? There's a handful of things. Leaders really understand the importance of fulfillment. They know that it's going to be increasingly important to their organizations as digital kind of continues to be one of the key drivers of customer behavior and one of the ways that customers actually receive information. That last point of that last final touch point where customers actually got something in their hands, if they're on site with you or if there was one of your sales reps, that's a really, really important and powerful time to be reaching a customer. But even still, leaders know that changes are needed. I mean, even they recognize, 24% of them recognize that they kind of need to overhaul some of their programs and some of their systems. Ironically, only 35% of laggards think that they do. We would argue that that number is much higher. So the differentiators between tiers really come down to about three different things. Cultural support is one key one. We ask the respondents to what extent they consider marketing fulfillment as they're making decisions about marketing planning and strategy and marketing optimization. And our leaders are at the 90% mark, right? But only about 40% of the laggards are doing this. Only about 40% of them are thinking about marketing fulfillment as a strategic piece of the marketing program. Organizationally, this is a big problem, and we'll get into this a little bit later with some of the staffing questions that we asked. 90% of our leaders, again, are telling us that, yes, we're organized to optimize this stuff. It's really important to us, and we're managing to it. Laggards, fairly minimal, right? About 27% of them tell us that they're actually organized sufficiently to optimize marketing fulfillment. Now, this is a big question in and of itself. What does optimal marketing fulfillment mean, right? And to the laggards, it probably means something very, very different than it does to the latents or the leaders. So then we sort of asked, okay, well, how consistent is marketing strategy across your lines of business, across your channels? And this is a question that I can tell you that as a customer intelligence professional, this is very much in line with actually most of the customer intelligence challenges that our customers face today, that our clients face today. We don't see a lot of consistent strategy, whether in customer intelligence and also down the line in marketing strategy with clients. And this is manifested very clearly in the marketing strategy world as well, or in marketing fulfillment world as well. Now, interestingly, about 35% of our laggards did say that they have senior leaders who believe in marketing fulfillment, that they know that marketing fulfillment does have business value. They're just not really doing anything about it. And again, the leaders lead here, right? 90% of them are telling us, yeah, we've got a seat at the executive table. Our leaders know what this means. And finally, do they have the right team of people? Questionable. The laggards do have some of the right people in place, and they have a team of folks to manage these things, but again, they're not really executing against it well. So the other big area of differentiation is within the measurement and analytics that we were talking about earlier. Our leaders, they measure, and they measure consistently, they measure regularly, and they are delivering reporting back into the organization about that measurement, about those metrics and KPIs. The latents are getting better. This is an area where we actually were surprised to see how many of them are reporting and measuring well. Laggards still in that 30%, 35% bucket still don't see the same kind of commitment and dedication to measurement. Analytically, we were really surprised again to see the latents and the leaders kind of, catching up to, or the latents catching up to the leaders here. And we see this as a differentiator between some of the earlier things that we saw in terms of cultural support for marketing fulfillment within the latents and the actual analytics and measurement that they're able to commit to this. So this is one area where the latents are catching up and investing. So this is a really great sign. But again, so this idea that we're committing people to the analysis and the optimization of marketing fulfillment processes. Really, really important. And then centralization. This is another area that, again, we mimics very closely what we see in customer intelligence as a whole. Where we see centralized analytics and centralized marketing practices, we see more maturity. And that, again, in marketing strategy practices, holds true across the board. Now, this is an interesting question because we thought about last mile and what that means. And what we sort of define last mile as is that last point, once the marketing material has left the vendor's hands, once it's gotten into the store, gotten into the salesperson's hands, what does that mean? What happens in that final mile before it reaches the actual consumer's hands? And our leaders are able to measure this. Our latents are doing okay, but the laggards, fewer than 25% of them are able to measure this and have visibility into this last mile. That means massive waste, right? That means that marketing material that you're spending an awful lot of money on could very well be sitting in a stockroom somewhere, never being used. You have no visibility into what that lost cost is, the opportunity cost of that is, let alone the waste. Really important area to actually measure against and start developing some skills in. And again, here, usage into the field, very similar to our last question about last mile use, right? So finally, the key differentiators that we found between the tiers is technology. And this is a surprise to us because we really wanted to understand what kinds of technology people are using. And some of that's insourced, some of it's outsourced, but our leaders actually invest, right? Technology, marketing technology are not inexpensive, but our leaders are actually investing in this. And a full 82% of them are telling us, yeah, we have spent money on ensuring that we have the right technology to optimize our marketing fulfillment processes. Latents, they're starting to spend the money on it, but you'll see that the strongly agrees are much weaker than the agrees here. And the laggards, again, we see that same 35% number, right? It keeps showing up. Only about a third of the people that we spoke with that we identified as laggards are able to measure, have invested in this area of their business. Defining a technology strategy is really important because that requires upfront thinking. That requires that marketing fulfillment be part of the planning process and be part of the strategic process of marketing programs and marketing strategy. So our leaders are absolutely there. They're saying we understand what we're going to do with marketing technology. We have a roadmap defined. We know where we're going to be in the next few years. Latents are getting there. Again, this idea of investment. They have a roadmap. They may not be doing it today, but certainly they're thinking about it and they're thinking about how to get there. And again, fewer than 30% of the laggards even thinking about how their marketing fulfillment roadmap, what their marketing fulfillment roadmap looks like. From an optimization perspective, this is an interesting question because we did find, again, that the leaders and the latents are catching up to leaders here. They are using technology. They're not down to the sort of we're filling out Excel spreadsheets world, which is really where the laggards sit. They're using technology in a much more strategic way. They're partnering with their vendors to identify the key technologies that they can use to gain more visibility, to optimize the entire marketing fulfillment process. And this is really heartening to see. And then, you know, they choose their partners strategically. So again, this idea of using 5 or 6 different vendors to manage your marketing fulfillment process, it's very fragmented, right? And we know what fragmentation does. It reduces accountability, it reduces responsibility, it causes problems. And it's really nice to see that, you know, leaders and latents both are thinking about how to partner with the right people. Laggards, you know, again, because investment's not a key initiative for them, and they're not really thinking about how to invest in technology or how to invest in marketing fulfillment, we're not really seeing them thinking about using strategic partners. So what does this all mean? What are the sort of key takeaways for the people sitting on the other side of the table, those of you who are thinking about marketing fulfillment processes and practices and how you can actually shore up your own marketing processes? Well, we found that most of the companies really do tend to rate themselves higher on the maturity scale, and we saw that reflected today, given that some 30% of you responded that you are leaders in this space. I hope that you are and that we have a bunch of leaders on the line today, but I suspect that if you actually took a self-test or an assessment, you'd find that there are some areas of improvement. Marketing fulfillment has to be a really key part of the marketing program. It has to come to the table early in the strategic planning process. We don't want to see marketing fulfillment relegated to, oh, now we've got the campaign built, how are we going to deploy it in store? What is the signage that we're going to put up in store? It really needs to be at the table much earlier in the process. And then measurement, really critical to maturity. We've seen this clearly, right? You can't gain maturity if you're not measuring the quality of your fulfillment program. You can't gain maturity if you can't see what is happening at the tail end of your marketing fulfillment program. And really the right combination of service providers and technology is what's going to help companies advance their marketing fulfillment maturity. So what are we recommending to clients? Well, a couple of different things. We really think that you could do a self-assessment. And as part of the research that we did with Archway, we actually developed a self-assessment. And at the end of this webinar, you're actually going to get an email with a link to that self-assessment. We recommend you take it. We recommend you spend some time with it. Actually send it to a few different people in the organization. Maybe somebody in operations, somebody in marketing, maybe somebody at the retail level if you're a retailer or a salesperson in the field. Understand how each different piece of the organization feels about marketing fulfillment. Once you've done that, you can start to determine whether your company is actually ready to evolve on the maturity scale. As you go through that process, you'll identify some gaps. You'll be able to say, well, we're not really sure that at the tail end of the cycle, whether it's retail, in-field salesperson, they're not ready to have, you know, this new technology pushed onto them. So how do we actually overcome some of those boundaries? How do we overcome some of those challenges? Once you've done that, you can start to build a roadmap and a timeline. And one of the things we recommend is, you know, you can start small. You can choose a line of business. You can choose one channel, one business unit, one product line. Start a pilot program if this seems like it's too much of a challenge to take on. You don't need to boil the ocean. But once you've proven that marketing fulfillment maturity actually has a great benefit to the organization, then you can start to roll it out and you'll gain much more consensus across the organization. Culturally, you need to sort of shift these impressions, right? Marketing fulfillment across the board has to be seen as a really strategic asset to the organization from the top down and across organizational lines. And really finding the right partners will help with that. So once you can improve measurability because you have the right partners, those partners are going to help you deliver insights. They're going to provide ongoing program improvements. And really, they know what the best practices are. They know how you can actually leverage what their clients are doing and the improvements that their clients are seeing in their marketing fulfillment practices as well. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it back over to Megan, who's going to talk a little bit about Archway's own marketing fulfillment assessment, which is a great process that they have in place to help their clients develop a view into their marketing fulfillment programs.
Thanks, Fatima. So Fatima's talked a lot today about how to improve marketing fulfillment and really evolve on the marketing maturity scale. We know that this isn't an easy thing to do, so beyond the Forrester recommendations that Fatima provided, we'd just like to let everybody on the call know today that we've got some services to help you really move on the maturity scale. So we can help you look at your existing process and really compare that to best practices in your industry specific. We can help you identify where the gaps are in your process and really draw a roadmap of how to get from wherever you are today to that leadership position. And what we're really focused on is driving out the waste within the key areas that I've got listed on this slide. So as Fatima said, we will be sending up a follow-up email that's going to have a recording of this, along with our research that we did in conjunction with Forrester and a self-assessment tool. That'll be coming out from the contact that invited you today. Otherwise, you are welcome to reach out to me as well, and my contact information is in this recording as well. So with that, let's actually move over to some questions that we've got submitted. Fatima, this first question is a really great question for you. What should companies be measuring when analyzing the effectiveness of their marketing fulfillment programs?
Sure. So there are a couple of things. You saw us talk a lot about timeliness, and that is certainly an easier thing to measure. But beyond that, we really want to see companies measuring the accuracy of the deliverables. We want to see companies measuring the actual usage of those deliverables, of the consumables, I don't know what that word is, of the consumables that they're delivering. And we want to really, and what that means is understanding what's coming back, right? We also really want to see audits of what's going up in stores, what's actually being delivered via mail and so on. These are all really key things to measure. And again, measuring them with a frequency that is valuable. So if you only measure timeliness once a year, you're not really getting a good view into things. We'd rather see you measure something like timeliness on a much more frequent basis, and some of the things that are maybe less relevant you can measure on a more infrequent basis. However, these are all going to be very dependent on your industry, on your vertical, and the types of consumables that you're actually delivering. And that's where it starts to get into the space of we really need to think about what metrics and KPIs are relevant to our business, and we really need a strategic partner to help us do that.
Great. All right, I'll actually take this next question. The question is, what is the average timeline to reach maturity? I'd say really depending on your current marketing fulfillment state, the average timeline to reach full maturity can take approximately about 9 to 12 months. There's a few different elements driving the maturity, which include analyzing your current process, implementing the process improvements and best practices, and then deploying the technology tools, and then further analyzing until the process is completely optimized. All right, another question that we've got, Fatima, if you want this one, is if my company is a latent, does it really matter if we get to a leadership position?
Yeah, so fully loaded question, right? I think absolutely. One of the things that we're finding at Forrester as we are moving towards this very customer-centric world, and we talk about customer obsession at Forrester actually, it's moving beyond customer centricity. And when we think about, again, I sort of mentioned the fragmentation, digital fragmentation. We're losing push marketing to some extent. We're really gaining this idea that consumers manage and end users manage the customer relationship with us. This is one of our chances. This idea of marketing fulfillment and last mile is one of our chances to put the right material in a customer's hands at exactly the right time. So being a latent is okay, but it doesn't give you strategic advantage. It doesn't differentiate you from your competitors, and it certainly doesn't drive customer experience. I think, one of the things that actually I completely forgot to mention, one of the things that we found is that our leaders are the ones telling us that customer experience is one of the key things that they look at, one of the key considerations for this idea of marketing fulfillment maturity, and how they think about marketing fulfillment. So as you start to think about what am I going to do when a customer really doesn't even have to have communication with me until she walks into a store? What do I do when a patient really doesn't have any communication with me until she walks into the doctor's office? And even then, I'm completely dependent on the doctor to make recommendations for the pharmaceutical. These are all really, really important touch points, and we think that the leaders are the only ones doing this. So yeah, it's critical to become a leader.
Great. We've got one more question, Fatima. What is emerging data economy you mentioned in your intro?
So we're talking a lot about this idea, and you heard me talk just a minute ago about consumers managing relationships with brands and businesses, with industries. There's a growing understanding in the consumer world that marketers have been using their data for financial gain. And whether it's a piece of the pie or some recognition or understanding of how that data is being used, consumers are raising their hands and saying, hey, we're part of this, we're part of this equation, we're part of this ecosystem, and we want to understand what it is. So a data economy is one where consumers are not remunerated per se, but they gain benefit from, they gain value from sharing their data. And it's going to become a much more bi-directional system. And it's not going to be so much about writing a consumer a check at the end of the year for sharing their data, but helping them understand what benefits and value they gain, potentially some kind of loyalty and rewards type programs and things of that nature. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. So that is actually the last of our questions. So I want to thank you, Fatima, for taking your time to share these results, and everybody else for taking the time to join us on the webinar today. Like we mentioned before, we will be sending out a recording and the research and a self-assessment tool after this webinar. Fatima, anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No, I want to thank you for having me today, and I hope this was helpful to the participants on the line.
All right, great. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks for your time, everyone.